Hey all, wanted to do a video on how many entries should you make in a GPP and DFS, and what types should you be looking for based on your skill level. I broke skill level up into 4 buckets, and I realize there are more than 4 buckets, but it just makes things simpler to explain. The buckets I made were a winning player with an expected value of $1.15 on every dollar he or she invests, an average player who's break even with the rake. That means they're not losing to the rake. A player who's not sure, I'll explain that one a little later, and a losing / recreational player who, let's say, loses about 15 cents for every dollar they invest. The easiest one to do, so I'll just go over it briefly, is the winning player. If you're winning over a long track record, that's important, over rake, you should basically just be playing everything and max entering all the GPPs within your bankroll. But I doubt these players who can do that are watching this video, so we can move on to the next one. I'll actually skip to the bottom. We'll do losing players first, because I think this is kind of the more counterintuitive piece of advice. So let's say you're you just play for fun. You're probably an underdog, or you're trying to get better, but you're assuming you're currently an underdog. The advice I hear from the advice you see online a lot of times is, if you're not max entering a tournament, don't enter it. I disagree with that with losing players, and you see with this little calculator I bet on how much you stand to lose, based off of a $10 entry into a GPP. First, you'll see the winning player. It's why they should enter everything. Is every entry. So if we did 5 entries, they only stand to profit over time $7. But if you bump that up to the full 150 max, they make more money. So they make more money on every entry they have. So they want to max enter everything. But you have the opposite effect for a losing player, where you see they stand to lose the most for every entry they do. Let's go in half. They still stand to lose $113 down to just $2 on their investment. So, you have to consider, if you're a losing player, first of all, if you're considering this an investment, you shouldn't play. You're giving away money. You could probably make more money in the stock market or some other gambling venture. But again, if you're watching this video, I doubt you wanted to watch the video to be told not to play, and you're going to play anyways. So if you are, here's what I would do, and I think this is the best strategy. Is I would play top heavy GPPs, and I would only enter 1 or 2 entries. I mean, if you have plenty of expendable money, have at it. But the reason I would play the top heavy GPPs is because they lay you the best odds. So basically, what you're trying to do, and when I say top heavy GPP, I mean it has to have 2 aspects to it. One, it has to be one of the larger payout ones, like a 50,000 or above, probably like 100,000 or above. Honestly, it has to have a large payout, because now you're getting a 100 to 1 or more shot at the top prize based on your investment. And the second aspect to a top heavy GPP is it has to be a payout that's not flat. So it needs to be where like 33% of the prize pool or more is going to first place. And I kind of wrote out a couple basic GPP structures here. So a top heavy payout would look like 100,000 the first, 25,000 the second, 10,000, or sometimes they even get worse than that, like in the Milli Maker and things like that. Most people hate those those structures, and fair enough. They I could understand why they hate that structure. But if you're a losing player, you're basically just you're trying to bank a big GPP to pay for a year or two or more of your DFS entertainment expenses, right? And probably take home a little bit for yourself. And that's the best chance I think you have at it, is in these large field, top heavy, high payout GPPs. And also, you could bank one of these, and save a decent portion of it to try to get better, right? And then after you bank, then you would change your strategy. Now, so this is opposed to the flat structure, which is what I would do if I'm in these second two buckets, average or not sure. So the difference between average and not sure, for me anyways, would be sample size, mainly. So you need a pretty large sample size to know if you're winning or losing. So if for example, if you do bank like a 50K GPP, your ROI is going to look huge, and you're going to think you're a winning player when there's just not enough evidence there, right? And evidence changes over time because the fields are getting stronger. There's more tools out there for everyone to use. So there's, like I said, there's layers to the amount of player types that there are in the DFS universe. So you could be somewhere on this spectrum. You most likely are somewhere in between these four buckets. But so if you're not sure, what I would do, especially if you just banked, would be to play like the 3 max type of GPPs or somewhere around that, because you protect your bankroll better that way. Now that you have a bankroll, or you're trying to figure out whether you should pursue this a little more seriously, you could play more the 3 max single entry. There's maybe even the 20 max, things like that. And you could still throw in a few entries into the top GPPs. And again, like, if you're a losing player, it doesn't matter what advice someone gives you on what to enter, you're going to lose money. But for the player who's not sure, it might actually be a break-even player. I like the idea of lowering your variance, not playing against as many entries against professional players, and sticking to that strategy until your sample size increases. So now let's go with the average player, and here my definition: the average player would be he has a long, or she has a long-term track record, a huge sample size. They're beating rake, but either not winning or barely winning or just barely losing. What would they do? So if you're even with rake, that's, first of all, that's a pretty big accomplishment. So you're right there on becoming a winning player overall. You probably just need to change a few things. And the first thing I would change is I would just enter anything avoiding the pros, the higher level ones. Contest selection more. But I would say, though, that you're going to want to max enter whatever you play, for sure, right? You want to use that edge of the ability to max enter over lesser players to your advantage now at this point. You just want to contest select more. And also, the idea of, if you know that you're a break-even player, including the rake, you could and you're properly bankrolled, which is a huge thing, you could take risks, right? Because it's essentially like, if you have updated your model, or if you have some new insight, you're a break-even player. that might give you an edge that day or that week or whatever. And the worst you can do is break even, right? I mean, leaving swings aside for a second here, and we're playing within our bankroll, as I said earlier. So you want to start taking some more chances there, and maybe taking some chances where there are pros in there, but just not a ton of them for some reason. Like yesterday was the fantasy football championship for DK and FanDuel, and there weren't a ton of pros playing the basketball slate, and it's a Sunday. Now a lot of people play basketball on Sunday anyways. They have a perfect opportunity for a average player who can beat rake to max enter some bigger higher dollar entries as long as your bankroll can afford it. Let's see. Is there anything else here that I really want to tackle? The top, heavy, and flat again. So for the losing player, you're going to be looking for the top, heavy, large field, big payout GPPs where you only enter 1, 2, 3, unless you have a huge expense account. Unless you have money to burn. And the guys in the middle, you're going to want to go more for the flat payout structure, especially if you're not sure if you're a winning player. And the average player, you're going to start taking chances. I think that covers everything I wanted to get at here. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Feel free to send me a message or comment. Have a good one.